So, Minister, your government is mandating public servants back to work, but they are saying that time in the office, they're actually not any more productive than they would be working from home. Are you concerned that this is going to have the reverse effect from what you're intending in terms of using them to deliver on your agenda?
No, I mean, listen, first of all, I want to thank all of them and all of you. And I apologize for being late. There was a lot of moving parts in trying to organize the week and me joining the Prime Minister in part of the trip. So we were trying to address that. So to your question, I think, first of all, I want to thank them. I've listened to a number of them. You know, I did a town hall with a number of employees of the Revenue Agency of Canada. I listened to them. So on one end, the policy is also that we bring people because we want to make sure we bring the folks back in the office. We have made adjustments also to the office infrastructure, as you know, because we want to make sure we can have all the public servant be housed properly in the office, and at the same time maintaining the culture that we have here in the public service to build a public service of the future. On the other end, I would say we've been the president of the Treasury Board has been talking and working with the unions to make sure that we do that in the most professional manners, listening to concerns and trying to accommodate whenever possible. So in that sense, I would say we need to bring people back to deliver service to Canadians, and at the same time do that in a way that would allow people to provide those services in the most efficient way for Canadians.
The 2024 budget talked about saving up to almost $4 billion by shrinking the office space in half over 10 years. Mm-hmm. That's clearly not the plan anymore, so are you still going to find any savings there, or is this actually going to cost more money?
Well, you're in a sense, when we did this assessment back in 2024, there were some adjustments being made because obviously this was at a time where we were looking at a different way to organize how people would work. We need to revise that, and we've been working with the Treasury Board to adjust that and do that in the most efficient manner, obviously, to support the infrastructure that will be needed to have the people here in the office.
The MOU with Alberta suggested that it would be a privately financed pipeline. Mm-hmm. It now appears that at least 80%, 90% of the money will come from taxpayers. Are you comfortable with that change?
Well, we certainly, I look at that in a way how we build our strategic assets, you know. You may have heard Fatih Birol recently said this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Canada to be that energy superpower at a time where the global energy architecture is being redesigned around the world. He was saying, you know, Canada is one of those nations that in this new energy architecture can play a leading role with stability, predictability, and I would say security of supply. And I think the nexus people see now between energy security, economic security, and national security is clear. So in that context, and I'll come very specifically to your question, then you look back and you say, okay, how can Canada seize that generational opportunity to support our allies with respect to energy security? And in that sense, you look at, obviously, how can we have access to tidewater? How can we export more? The MOU that was put forward between the federal government and Alberta is allowing for that infrastructure to be built, and we will be providing further details about the exact financial model behind it. But I can assure you that if you look at TMX, this has been a good investment for Canadians, because if you look at the return on equity that we put for a project of that size, you would see that the revenues generating from an asset like that is providing very interesting returns for Canadians. And so we already have a model that has paid off dividend to Canadians in terms of how you finance, because when you do these big infrastructure, you will know that you have a part of equity and a part of debt. If you look at your return on equity, it's very interesting how you can finance these things in the most profitable way. But I think, as the Prime Minister has been saying and the Premier, there's still going to be discussions as to the exact financial model behind it. But for Canadians who are watching today, what I can say is that we understand that in the world, if you look at the megatrend of the world, Canada has the right fundamentals. We have the people, we have the industry, we have the critical minerals, we have the natural resources, and we have the market. So that's why when I look at the futures and how you want to position Canada, I think this is a real opportunity for Canadians, not only in terms of conventional energy, but you've heard also Fatih Birol talking about nuclear and the role that Canada can play. So I just want to say on the energy landscape, I certainly see that as a contributor to Canada's growth, and certainly positioning Canada as an energy export superpower. And therefore, I think in that sense, it's very interesting for Canadians.
When
The
did you-
last budget you described as a time to build, and based on recent announcements, submarines, et cetera, it looks like that is still the case. How do you expect to pay for it?
Well, as you know, this is a big day for Canada. I'm sure the Prime Minister will have more to say with respect to the first part of your question. But I think what you're saying is that yes, we're doing things at the speed and scale not seen, and it goes back to a lot of businesses and people have asked me as we're looking at pre-budget consultation. To your point, people seek certainty, and I think it is fair to say when I was at the last G7, what is certainty today is to focus on what you can control. What we can control, for example, and I'll make the case at the federal, provincial, territorial finance ministers meeting we'll have next week in Charlottetown in Prince Edward Island is for example, to remove interprovincial trade barrier. That would provide $220 billion to our GDP. It's making sure we have one Canadian economy. It's making sure that we diversify our market. It's making sure also that when we do strategic procurements, that this would benefit first and foremost Canadian workers, Canadian businesses, Canadian industries. And I think that is the thinking behind the large acquisition and procurement investment we're going to be doing. That's why when we said we want to have a buy Canadian policy was really to see and I would say learn from also other G7 nations which have used defense budget, to your point with respect to defense, as a way to support innovation, research and development, and industries and innovation in their country. Canada is no different. We'll do that in a very smart way and in a way that can benefit workers, that can benefit industries and across the nation.
Are you
But
saying
why-
the
but why will
deficit's
your
not
gov-
going to go up from all this spending?
What I'm saying is that we have put in the fiscal framework and a very clear timeline with respect to how we're going to reach the objective that we have set. If you refer to the NATO target, we have been very clear on how we're going to do that. And that's what you've seen over time. You're seeing a number of procurement that have been taking place and investment being done by the Canadian Armed Forces. And I would say we're very much on track to meet the commitment we have made both to NATO but also to Canadians.
But
I'm
why
asking how you're
why
gonna
will
pay
you not
for it.
release the total amount that your government plans to spend on defense on an annual basis?
Well, yeah. Well, we've been, if you go back to the budget and you look at the annexes, we have been able to describe in a fair amount of detail. I've seen some people commenting, but I would refer them to the annexes in previous government. We have been fairly clear as to what is the objective. We've been fairly clear as to the amounts that have been put aside, and we've provided, and I can provide you additional detail if you want in the annex to Budget 2025, the investments that are going to be done and kind of the timeline when you look at the fiscal framework over the next few years. So I think you see where we're going. You see the major procurement. We've been very clear to Canadians. And when I presented Budget 2025, we said we're making generational investments. One was in housing, the other one infrastructure, productivity, innovation, and defense, a bit like what Germany has presented at the time. So I think it's very clear where we're going and the direction to meet our NATO target, but at the same time, what you're saying, in my view, is smart procurement. How you make that to make sure that you derive benefits nationally for that. But I know you're going to come, I think, to some part of the pre-budget consultation. That's what they told me. So,
But the
you're-
PBO has asked your department 3 times for how you're going to, more information on how the government's going to meet its defense.
I appreciate that I have seen that. What I can say is that we've been we've been publishing in Budget 2025 both the direction we're going, but also a very specific example of the procurement program that we've put in place, and it gives you directionally where we're going, and there'll be more details obviously as we go forward. You know, we've always been very transparent with Canadians. I would say very transparent from the get-go to say what is the objective, where Canada is going to be contributing, what kind of system the armed forces are going to be needing to protect and defend Canada, and how we're going to be financing that. I think we have provided, you know, the direction of that, and as programs and as acquisitions are coming forward, we'll provide more detail, obviously.
Can you be transparent about how you're going to pay for all this stuff?
Well,
because so far you said interprovincial free trade barriers, which is largely in the hands of the provinces at this point. So beyond that, how are you going to pay for all these?
Let me just correct that. I was just referring to the things that we can do together.
Sure.
What I would say is that what we have said is that we're making investment to build the strongest economy in the G7, and therefore, obviously, we're focusing on growth. And that, obviously, when we're going to present Budget 2026, and that's why we launched the budget consultation, we'll be looking at measures to make the Canadian economy strong and make sure that, you know, the systems and the procurement we're doing meet the NATO requirement, but at the same time, that the Canadian economy can finance these investments. And I would say, if you look at the IMF, we have the strongest fiscal position of the G7. So I would say, when you compare Canada to all the G7 partners and our NATO partners and our NATO commitment, I think Canadians can understand that we have a strong fiscal position, and we're investing in the things that will generate growth to the country, and therefore making sure that we can afford what we're going to be doing in order to meet our NATO requirement. I'll just see you on the next. I think you. I was told you were coming this way, but you know, you're welcome. And sorry for being late. I was not aware. I thought you were coming for a spray. I was not aware there was a, so I apologize for that. My apologies. Vous aurez compris, c'est toujours une période très importante de l'année. Je suis ravi que vous ayez pris le temps d'être avec nous aujourd'hui parce que clairement, il y a beaucoup de choses qui se passent dans le monde, beaucoup de volatilité, beaucoup de complexité. Mais je vous dirais, comme je le disais à nos collègues, les journalistes plus tôt, que j'ai jamais été aussi confiant dans l'économie canadienne. Clairement, on a, je dis, les fondamentaux, c'est-à-dire on a le talent. On a certainement des industries, plusieurs sont représentées ici, qui sont très talentueuses, des industries fortes dans des secteurs clés de croissance. On a les minéraux critiques, on a évidemment l'énergie, autant conventionnelle que renouvelable, et on a accès au marché. Sinon, les seuls pays du G7 avec un accord de libre-échange avec tous les autres pays du G7. Donc, nous sommes dans une position, je veux dire, importante. 2025, c'est des investissements générationnels, vous avez vu, qui ont, je pense, changé la nature de la croissance, qui vont changer certainement la nature. L'économie est en restructuration. Mais on a vu des investissements générationnels en matière d'infrastructure, en matière de logement, en matière d'innovation, productivité, évidemment en matière de défense. Et je vous dirais même que le plan d'investissement, c'est le plus important des pays du G7 présentement en infrastructure. Donc, on est dans une position certainement importante là-dessus. Lors de l'énoncé économique, on a mis les Canadiens à jour. On a parlé évidemment des mesures d'abordabilité qui sont au cœur des préoccupations des Canadiens, le prix de l'essence, le prix du logement, le prix de la nourriture. Donc des mesures structurantes pour aider les Canadiens et Canadiennes durant cette période-là. Et le budget de 2026, c'est vraiment la prochaine phase. On s'est donné, le Premier ministre et moi, l'objectif de bâtir l'économie la plus forte du G7. Justement, une des raisons pour lesquelles j'étais un peu en retard, c'est qu'on finalisait mes plans pour que j'aille rejoindre le Premier ministre dans la deuxième partie de son voyage, sa mission à l'étranger, en Arabie Saoudite, pour rencontrer nos collègues là-bas. Donc, c'est une des raisons pourquoi j'étais légèrement en retard. Alors, je vous remercie de m'avoir attendu, mais surtout, je pense qu'aujourd'hui, discussion importante avec ma collègue Bardish Jagger, qui est aussi, qui vient d'une région, évidemment, on connaît bien l'innovation. On va parler d'innovation, de croissance. Comment on positionne le Canada dans l'économie du 20e siècle, du 21e siècle, avec les grandes tendances mondiales. Moi, je pense que là-dessus, on a certainement une longueur d'avance. So, let me just say a few words to welcome you. I apologize for being slightly late. And delighted that this is a group which is going to be helping us to launch Budget 2026 consultations. Today we're launching, so Canadians will be able to join their voice in shaping the future of Canada. We said all for Canada and a Canada for all. That was what we were saying. We want Canadians from all walks of life, every region, every industry, from coast to coast to coast, to participate and share where they see Canada going. Clearly, when I'm with business leaders like you, you see the complexity of the world, the volatility, there's some headwind. But I think it is fair to say that the Canadian economy is far more resilient than a number of people had expected. Certainly the fundamentals are strong. We are still a very big magnet for talent. We have very strong industries, and many of them are represented here today. We know how to build a car, we know how to build a plane, we know how to build a nuclear reactor, just to mention a few, but we know how to build. We know how to do big things in this country. And the spirit of ambition, of speed and scale is certainly there with Canadians. We also have what is essential in the 21st century when I think about critical minerals. And I was just with the head of the International Energy Agency, and you may have seen he was praising Canada as an energy export superpower, positioning Canada in conventional, also renewable, whether it's nuclear and conventional energy. So I think many people would say critical minerals are akin to also what oil was in the 20th century. You will need that in order to fuel the economy of the 21st century. When it comes to energy, oftentimes we say demography is destiny. I would say energy is destiny. And Canada has abundant opportunities and possibilities when it comes to energy. And lastly, we're the only G7 country with a free trade with all the other G7 partners. So we start from a very strong base. When you sit at the G7, G20, the world is looking at Canada. And that's why in Budget 2025, we laid out the foundation with generational investments in housing, in infrastructure, in productivity, innovation, in defense. And in fact, I would put it to you that we have the largest infrastructure plan of all the G7 nations. And therefore, that provides a lot of opportunities for each and every one of you, for industries, for workers across our nation. That's why I was sharing also with with the media before. And so 22, and when I presented the spring economic update in 2026, was really to tell Canadians that our plan is on track. And that we understand that we need to make investments in order to position Canada to be the strongest economy in the G7, but at the same time be very cognizant of what Canadians are feeling. The affordability issue is top of mind for people. Price of gas, price of home, price of food. And I would say on these three levels, we've been acting to support Canadians and to provide that kind of bridge and support and boost that they need in order to see the benefit of the restructured economy. And I think the Prime Minister spoke eloquently about that the Canadian economy is being restructured, but will provide more resiliency and opportunities, and I hope to hear from you on that. And so today is really the launch of our pre-budget consultation, how we make Canada resilient, looking at growth, looking at the mega trends, looking at things that we can do together. And I would say both, whether it was the spring economic update, which we presented, and before the budget 2025, these were informed by the views of Canadians, by the views of leaders just like you, business, community leaders, labor leaders, my colleagues in the province and territories, which we're going to meet next week in Charlottetown, in Prince Edward Island, to really lay the foundation for the next budget. So, and I know there's a lot of things, and I'll just finish with that. I was sharing with our colleagues from the media that a lot of people are asking me, Minister, we want certainty. And I said, well, I want certainty more than anyone else. But what is certainty in today's world is to focus on what you can control. And what we can control is to make generational investments. What we can control is to remove interprovincial trade barriers. What we can control is to build one Canadian economy. What we can control is to invest in our industries and do smart procurement, like we're doing. What we can control is to diversify our exports and to build export markets in growth region of the world. And the fact that Canada now has preferential market access to 1.5 billion consumers is certainly helping us to make our economy more resilient and provide opportunities. So with that, I'll stop there, but I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for the level of ambition that you're going to bring to this discussion. And thank you also for helping us to really build the strongest economy in the G7. We're going to do that together. We're going to seize the moment. We're going to be ambitious. And together, I'm very confident that we're going to build the strongest economy in the G7. So with that, I'll turn over to our moderator. But again, a very warm welcome. And thank you for taking a day in July to really chart the future of this country together. Merci tout le monde.
All right, that just
Thank you,
concludes
sir.
your media portion.